I'm Michaela Stetler. I'm the president of the Seth Center. And with me is Dave Selak.
David Selak. I'm the CEO of the Seth Center. And today is going to be one of my absolutely most interesting and fascinating and beneficial topics that I can think of to talk about, which is the multidimensional self, counterparts, future selves, past selves, reincarnational selves.
Probable selves.
Probable selves. Thank you.
That sounds confusing. I'm sure people are wondering, what on earth does that mean, multidimensional self, and who are all these selves? And I can barely keep track day to day.
I know. Yeah. Well, some part of ourselves actually does keep track of all that, but perhaps we should actually look at defining and understanding what some of those terms that we just mentioned actually are.
Right.
Do you want to start with that?
Yeah. So the way that Seth discusses this is that you are a vast, unlimited, multi-dimensional being entity, right? And you are in a constant state of growth and becoming. So there's always new aspects of identity, but it's not separate. It's different aspects. It's like you could think of in your own lifetime, right? You had a 4-year-old self, you had a 14-year-old self, maybe depending on how old you are, you have other selves. They're still all the same self. They're just different phases or expressions.
So let me enhance what you just said. So a multidimensional self means that we exist, you exist, I exist, Michaela exists in this normal waking reality now. But Michaela also exists in the future, she exists in the past, and she exists in dimensions, believe it or not, that are very different from the one that we're experiencing now. So, for example, can you imagine that there is a dimension where Michaela doesn't have a body? She is just a form, a thought form, for example. So that can be one example of another dimension. Another dimension that almost everyone's familiar with is the dream state. That in itself is another dimension which has very different rules, very different experiences, and is also a dimension that is very close to this waking reality, and in fact is a byproduct of waking reality.
Well, so yes, and what I would say is, okay, so you have a dream self that retains like memory of all the dream activity. And I wouldn't say that the dream state comes out of waking reality. I would say it's the reverse, like waking reality more comes out of the dream state. So we'll get into dreams and dreaming self because dreams are a really major part of all the body of Seth material. But for our purposes today, I think the things that people are really interested in that are more familiar to them is the idea of reincarnation, and most people are thinking of it as a past self. But the reality is that all time, it's all happening simultaneous. It's more like, think of it as a different location. So one way that I explain this is you could turn on the TV and you could watch or stream something that was, 20,000 BC or takes place in ancient Greece. And then you could also watch Star Trek or Star Wars, something that is in the future. You could watch a period drama and you could watch a contemporary. It's all happening at once. It's like changing channels, but it's all happening at the same spacious present.
Yeah. So we actually have to talk a little bit about time and the nature of time for some of this to make sense. And an easy way, I think, to understand it is time is not mutually exclusive. There's various versions of time. There's linear time, 1 second after another. You watch the clock, and you can watch the seconds tick by. And yet there are other kinds of time where it's all at the same time. So that's simultaneous time. So we have to understand a little bit about that and maybe take it on speculation that there's this other kind of time other than linear. So that's where simultaneous selves, meaning, and I'm going to ask you a question here, simultaneous selves all exist at the same time. So you can have simultaneous selves in the past. You can have simultaneous selves that are in the future, and they are all you. So can you give us, Michaela, some examples from your life on selves that you have discovered, whether they're in the past or in the future, or even probable, which we can go into?
Well, let's go into probable later. I do want to answer that, but I just want to give an example that will help people to understand that our perception of time is kind of prejudiced and distorted, because everyone here has had the experience. They're in school waiting for the bell to ring to get out, and time goes 2 to 3 to 4 times slower than normal. You've all had the experience where you've been completely engrossed in some really fun or creative activity. You've kind of slipped into an altered state, and hours pass by, and it feels to you like it was, maybe 10, 15 minutes, and you completely lose track of time. So everybody in their ordinary reality and understanding of reality has experienced vast differences in even linear time with these kinds of things. So I just want to throw that in for the folks at home.
Yeah, we have to explain and touch on various subjects so that this animal called simultaneous selves and reincarnational selves and probable selves, and is somewhat understandable. So we have to touch on these subjects,
right?
So it'll make sense.
So I've actually, you asked about if I have memories of other lifetimes or have had awareness of other lifetimes. And I've had it quite a bit. And I've had it oftentimes just completely spontaneous. Like one kind of dramatic example, I might have shared this one with you. I don't know. So
I'll tell you.
I was in a yoga class and this was in my late 20s, early 30s when this happened. And I was a pretty intense yogi in those days. I was doing a very strong Ashtanga practice. And there's one particular pose. It's like you're folded over, your legs are over your shoulders, your arms are tied together, like, clasped behind your back. And I'm having, and the teacher is like getting me into this pose. And even though I was very flexible, this was always like a hard pose. And I'm in this pose and I suddenly get a total flashback to a lifetime in Africa where I'm in this torture device that is very much like being put in that position. It felt exactly the same way. And I'm feeling the hot African noonday sun beating on my naked back. I'm seeing the red earth. I'm seeing the sweat dripping off of my face, the ants crawling by, and this feeling of agony of being locked into that position.
Wow.
That was a dramatic one, but I've had other ones. I've had memories of lifetimes in Egypt where, and this is again, I think a lot of people may have an experience like this, is when you meet somebody and you feel like you know them already. And I've had that experience, and then I'll have a flash either, at some point or another in a dream where I'll remember the life that we shared together, or where we were close with each other.
So it's like a bit of a snapshot.
Yeah, it comes like a flash of like where I'll see a scene, and I'll have all the emotional connotation of what the relationship was. Now, I haven't had memories of lifetimes where I absolutely hated somebody and we were like enemies. It's always somebody that I had a very close, loving, or really significant relationship with. Have you had, what have been your experiences?
Gosh, I've got quite a number. And we should probably talk about how people can access some of their simultaneous lives.
Yeah, what have you done?
And really, I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
But what's the point? It's kind of like, and what are there benefits to this in trying to explore this? And there are, and really unexpected ones too, which we will get. I'm so excited by this because it's really cool, and we will get there. So we'll definitely talk about that today. So yes, I've had a number of. From mine, it's either through trans regressions, or in the dream state. And I too have had one in Egypt. I'll tell you that one. It's not very salubrious, and I wasn't a king and I wasn't a queen, and I was, I'll tell you what happened. I was lower middle management, shall we say, and my job was leading a team of guys into one of the pyramids where we were doing maintenance work on some of the big stone blocks.
Pyramid maintenance. I love it.
Well, you think, they just build them, but someone's got to look after this stuff. So I'm in there with a team of guys. It's sweaty, dirty work. And I had like 3 or 4 guys. We're deep inside the pyramid. I think it was hot, but I can't remember. I know we were sweating. It was dirty work. This is not high-class stuff. We weren't paid well. But I do remember we were moving these giant blocks of stone. And the interesting thing about it, which has actually a fascinating piece to it, is you could not move these blocks by yourself. And we didn't have, I don't think we had crowbars or anything. But what we did have it was something like a small pistol type thing, and which actually used sound to help move these blocks. And I did some research on this, and they have found evidence that these pistol type things have existed. They didn't really know what they were. So I know how crazy that sounds.
That is...
All I know is that I saw that, and I knew this person was me. Didn't look anything like, this me. But it was a really strong, subjective, emotional feeling like, that's me. That's what we're doing. This is our job. And we were doing our job.
I love that. And I would like to mention for like the folks at home, if you read the books in the Seth, the body of work of the Seth material, I was just looking at this the other day. He does talk about it quite a bit in the Nature of Personal Reality of how inner sound creates physical experience in objects.
Yeah.
Inner sound and inner light. And actually, maybe, we might put a note in the podcast notes. There's more and more evidence in quantum physics and physics these days about things that Seth said 40, 60 years ago, right?
I think Boston University, one of the Eastern universities, is doing research on using sound for locomotion.
Love it.
And I had a dream about an airsicle.
An airsicle.
Sound-powered motorcycle in the air. So...
non-toxic, non-polluting, no lithium batteries required.
So
How
at any
awesome
rate,
would that be?
they're proving it true. So that's just one example. But I'd like to mention very briefly is these other existences exist in time. Time's like a place. So 1492 exists now. 2,243 exists now, and to gain a wide array and variety of experiences throughout time, you would incarnate in time to give you that variety of experience. So, for example, Seth says you might be a super genius in one lifetime. You might be
Are you
a guy.
pointing to me?
Yeah, I am super. Well, you are pretty smart. Let's be true. And but you might be less intelligent in another one. You might have a profound disability in one. You might be a super athlete in another. So by incarnating with various abilities and skills and all that kind of thing, you get a broad array of human experience.
Right. So that's another thing, like very clearly in the Seth material, is that once you come into this particular physical system of reality, like there's a basic minimum requirement. Like not all consciousnesses are well suited to physical reality. It's a particularly challenging learning system. But you have to at least come in as male, female, and grow to adulthood and be a parent. Like you've got to, well, obviously if you come in, come in as a child, right? So you have to have, that's a bare minimum. So continuing on to what you said, is that if you're looking at this as like a larger, I love the word gestalt, but it's kind of like a larger field of identity, and you're here learning and developing your ability to intentionally use the energy of mind, thought, emotion to create experience, right? So you have to get good at it. So you need a lot of different angles. So you're not going to get good at all these things if you only have, one or two types of experience. You need, it's a what do you call it in college where you get like a degree in humanities? You need a little bit of all of it, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
according to your purposes. Now, some people are very like in their, and this is just natural to how their entity is. They're very like super focused, disciplined, and they'll do very intense lifetimes, and they'll be counseled to like, why don't you take a break, or why don't you do a lifetime that's a little bit of everything. You don't have to be so extreme. People do it different ways.
And the cool part about this, there's so many cool parts and so many valuable parts. It begins to explain, because you think, why would anyone choose to come in with a significant and prominent disability?
Right.
So I'll use Stephen Hawking as an example.
I was just thinking of that.
Of course you were. Because I sent you the telepathic message.
Thank you, sir.
And speaking of telepathic messages, the cool thing is, what I've found out is all these selves are connected telepathically all of the time. So the ability that Michaela develops in this lifetime gets transferred and becomes a latent ability in some of her other existences. And so those selves who are developing their abilities, Michaela can draw from them, and vice versa.
I've had so many, I've had pronounced experiences of that in this lifetime. Okay. So I was originally on a path as a performing artist, dancer, choreographer. I got veered off of that, which we'll talk about when we talk about probable selves.
Okay.
And sort of quote unquote accidentally found my way into medicine. And it was like I was a medical prodigy, because for me, it was not at all the experience of learning something new. Right. It was, I always had this feeling of, oh, right, I remember this, I remember that. And then I even started having memories of lifetimes as doctors in different countries in different time periods. So there was
as a male?
Yes, as a male. I was
like, can you give us a little more?
In China, probably like in the 1600s, and then earlier. I've had a number of lifetimes in China where I did really deep qigong practices, which are the Chinese term for all of these kind of practices where you're using thought, movement, breath to move and balance energy. And it's kind of an umbrella term that just means energy mastery through practice over time. Probably one of the forms that's most familiar to people is Tai Chi Chuan. A lot of people have heard of Tai Chi. Anyway, I was creating forms, and also I was a traditional doctor and did a lot of like research around herbs. And, so it was just, I just remembered things. It was very easy for me. So I've had that experience, those kind of things many times. So this is something, to your point, Dave, like what is the benefit for us to remember or connect with any of our other simultaneous selves? And there's a couple of, in my mind, but I'm sure you're thinking of others, really significant benefits. Is one, you can tap into the wisdom, the learning, the skills, the whatever qualities they developed. If they developed a lot of patience, if they developed, whatever they developed, you can tap into that. And the other...
I have a great example.
Okay. Do you want to say it now, and I'll talk about another benefit?
Yeah. So a great example of this is... probably 15, 20 years ago, I brought one of my kids into a music lesson, into a guitar lesson. And I'm sitting there and thinking, watching, anyway. And I love music, but, never played, never sang, never did anything really, except turn the knob on, whatever it was that you could turn the knob on, and it got louder, right? Anyway, I sat there and I just had this impulse. It's like, I should do this. I could do this. And I'd had some dreams with some famous musicians in them. Jackson Browne, Sean Colvin, Jimmy Buffett. So some of these are people that I knew or that I really enjoyed. Anyway, so I started to take guitar lessons. And, you know, I'm not a threat for Grammys at all to anyone, or anything. But it is so enjoyable. But it's not just the enjoyment, although that's fantastic. What that helped me do is, as a Western male in the 21st and 20th century, I was conditioned to generally suppress my feelings and emotions. And what the music, developing my musical ability, has allowed me to feel more deeply. And that has been, I can't tell you, a massive benefit for me.
Wow.
So that I become more balanced.
I love that.
Using my intuitions, using my emotions, allowing myself to express a lot more. And so that impulse that I followed developed a latent ability that was informed by some of these dream figures.
So did you found it pretty easy to at least pick up the basics of guitar?
Yeah, after a while, look, I was clumsy but I developed an ability to sing, took some singing lessons. I love it. I enjoy it. Take my guitar wherever I go. And yeah, it continues to feed me, and provide nourishment across a variety of dimensions. So
you get that richness, you get less limitation. So your whole experience of yourself, your reality is less limited, more full, more rich, more free.
Exactly. And Seth says
there's a benefit for you.
These are latent abilities that you have, that these other selves have developed, and that you can tap into and use, that you actually will develop them more easily than you would otherwise.
Absolutely. So along with that, the other point I was going to make of what the benefit is that, depending on whatever your particular life is like this time around, to understand that you are much more than that, not as an intellectual concept, but because you are connected with more of all of your multidimensional reality. It gives you just much more feeling of confidence, security, a kind of acceptance of yourself, like you feel more whole and complete, and yet also more expansive at the same time.
Exactly. And the other thing is, and we haven't touched on this yet, so we're talking simultaneous selves, future selves, historical selves. One of the biggest messages from the material is your consciousness will never be extinguished. And most people do feel deep down that they're immortal.
Well, because it's true. Once you come into an individuated identity, you just continue to grow, evolve, and expand. It will never, ever, 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 ever stop. You just more and more you-ness gets to unfold and emerge.
And it takes the fear away, because it's like, so, and we'll get to this in another episode.
The death and dying episode.
How did you know? I was going there.
Sorry, David. Not sorry.
You thunderstole me.
The telepathy is strong. The force is strong between us.
Yes, it is. But yeah, so all this starts to come together in a meaningful way. So it's not just a party trick. Oh yeah, I did a past life regression last week. It's no, I've discovered this about myself. I want to ask you.
Okay.
Give us a bit of a list of what other lives that you've discovered, male, female, past, future.
All right.
Let it out, baby.
We'll leave probable selves to the side for now. All right.
Oh, yeah. We'll come back to that.
Let's put them. So multiple lives in China, Japan, India, and the ones that I remember are very much focused on healing, very much focused on spiritual practices, energy practices, things like that. Multiple lives being tortured and put to death for challenging the Catholic Christian status quo as a woman and a witch. That life in Africa. multiple lives in Egypt. And this time around, some of the people closest to me in this lifetime were from lifetimes in Egypt. My son is a case in point, where he was, in one lifetime, my spiritual master in Egypt.
Whoa.
He was like the head priest of the
So have you
temple.
talked about that with him?
Oh, yeah. Talk about this stuff all the time. Now, a lot of people are like comfortable, familiar with the idea of past selves. And in fact, there is quite a lot of, verified proof where there's no way somebody could have known this information, where it could be traceable. So you can establish like past lives. But since we're, even in a lot of spiritual circles, they are not understanding that there's just only the eternal now, spacious present.
Yeah.
It's all happening at once. Yeah. So they don't have future life experiences.
Right.
Just this year,
yeah,
I had a very clear connection with a future self.
Oh, I want to hear about that.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it's a bit of a story. You do?
Yeah.
All right. So this, and how it came through. Okay, let me make this point because it'll connect all this together. What I have observed in my own life and working with, clients, patients over the many years is that very typically a lifetime, wherever it takes place, that you are connecting with in this particular, from this focal personality, it's going to have some thematic relationship to the themes you're working on in this lifetime, right?
Huh.
So you can think of it like in a symphonic piece, right? There's motifs, there's themes through a whole,
right.
Multi-movements of a symphony. And so in this lifetime, you have certain themes, motifs. You're more likely to have what I would call like bleed throughs or memories or conscious awareness of other lifetimes that are working with similar themes.
Got it.
Have you noticed that?
Not so much as you, but I noticed the similarities in the, bluntly, the physicalness.
Hmm.
Like I tend to be like a tall, thin person, whether it's male or female. And yeah, no, I haven't seen the kind of themes that you're talking about, but I get a sense that we're exploring a couple of, I'll give you an example. So one, and I'm still coming to grips with it because it's a little bit of a famous personage, and that is I've got some kind of a link with Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Wow.
So the American transcendentalist of the 1870s, I think. Anyway, can't remember. But anyway, I've been to his place, gone through his house.
Did it feel familiar?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And the people and other people that are, previously alive but now dead, and I have gone through. So like there's some real connections there. But I have a little bit of I got problems with Ralph.
I've got a bone to pick with you, Mr. Emerson.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got one with me too. But at any rate, but there's a real simpatico, and the connection's undeniable. Is it ever I know people like proof only because we come from a science place in this culture. It would be pretty tough to prove, and if someone didn't want to accept the proof that this stuff exists, you're never going to prove it to them. So, but the other pieces for me are, for example, I've had and have an existence as a farm woman in Vietnam. I'm a mom. Nothing too crazy happening.
Do you remember what you grew?
No, but I see her squatting, cooking over an open fire out in the country, just living a life.
What was it? Do you have like a sense of contentment? Like what was the life like?
It's a lovely life. I mean, hardworking, definitely. It explains a lot of things for me in that I'm very attracted to that culture. Been there a few times. I feel very comfortable there. And let's see, some other lives, including a mom with like 10 or 12 kids in an orchard area in southern France, back in the 1800s, a doctor in the Netherlands My house is burning. I run out of this burning house. I jump in a well and I die
Oh no.
to escape the fire.
Oh.
So, and there, there's a number of others too. A Spanish horseman. Horses are my thing.
Wow.
I have a ranch. I've got a big family.
Can you ride in this lifetime? Did
no,
you ever?
I never have, but I love horses. I know I could. I just have never gone that track. But it's
So that's you
and I love
know
Spain
quite
too.
a few of them. You've been all over the world.
Yeah, mostly U.S.
France,
and
Spain,
Europe. Yeah.
Vietnam,
bit of Egypt.
Maybe we
There's
we
one
probably
other.
had one there.
There's one
together.
other. I hesitate. No, I'm not. I don't even hesitate. I was a soldier in the Middle East, somewhat modern day, and the experience was horrific.
Oh gosh.
All I can say is you lose your shit during a war, and you will shoot at anything. You don't even know if it's your side. You don't know if it's the other people. Because the terror, fear, the adrenaline, you just go for it. And it's
Wow.
that experience, is that positive? Not really, but is it an experience? Absolutely. So
Well, you probably learned
it's undeniable.
a lot about the futility and purposelessness of
absolutely,
like
because
mass
it's
violence.
madness and mayhem.
Yeah.
There's no good that comes from it.
wow.
It's a very destructive force, obviously, and something many men especially come back from and are traumatized by.
Well, no wonder,
Yeah, of course.
Completely inhumane.
Yeah.
So you wanted to hear about this future life?
Yes, I would.
Okay, because it does connect with this life. So I think how I was working with it was kind of going into a bit of like a kind of a session space, a little bit altered state about a tendency, and that it's really come through. I've really noticed it since taking over this role, since you asked me to take over the role of being president here and build this, kind of grow the company with you, of being like over responsible, hyper responsible for things, right? Taking too much responsibility on. And so I had just like immediately this future self who was male, who was in a time period that was kind of like where the technology had developed to the point where they could control nature, they could actually destroy the whole planet. And he had been trying to tell the powers that be, because he was involved with the inner circle, is like, no, you're going to destroy the planet. You're not understanding. You're just getting into this thing over power. He kept trying to tell them to avert impending disaster. And they didn't listen. He couldn't get them to understand and listen. And sure enough, total cataclysm happened, right? It's like massive hundreds and hundreds of foot waves, fires, earthquakes, like continents rising, falling, like all of that. And there was this like actual experienced his moment of death and this super intense death vow. So at this moment of death in this massive planetary-wide cataclysmic destruction, was feeling like he had failed preventing this, that he could have and should have been able to prevent this.
Right.
And this absolute heartbreaking, despairing grief at all the destructive loss of life.
Wow.
And and this vow that he would, have to do something to prevent it. So I then became aware that this part of my total self, this personality, had a very strong influence in this life and keeps trying to like live out his death vow through me. And in the session, I had to set him straight. It's like, first of all, gross misunderstanding of the nature of collective reality. You cannot be responsible for like something that is a mass event. Like that is not up to you.
Right.
And two, you can't force people to grow or in spiritual, emotional maturity to understand that you're playing with the forces of nature. And if you're trying to do it from control and domination, you're going to create destruction. Like you can't force people to want to grow. They could have all this technological stuff, right? But they didn't have the spiritual maturity. Right. And third of all, you had your turn. This is my life. I am not here to redeem your death vow and you get to live vicariously through me. So back the F off and get your hyper responsibility out of my life.
Well, that's fantastic. It brings to mind something. It's like, what's the value of all this? So we talked about the multidimensional self, but there's really a practical thing that anyone can do, and I've done it numerous times. I'm sure you have. Look, we all face challenges. We all face problems. We all have things that we're grappling with. Knowing that you have other existences, you can draw from them solutions because they have worked through many, many things. They've developed many, many skills and abilities. You can draw from them in solving the challenges that you have. And you have access to everything they've developed. You have access to all of their dreams where they solve lots of issues and problems. And it's like a giant database of solutions that's yours. It's rightfully yours.
Right.
And you can draw from that. Every time you go to sleep at night, you can draw from your collection of personalities that have been incarnated over time.
And vice versa, because I actually had to bring this future personality healing. I had to do psychological therapy with him.
And that's the thing is when you grow, as Michaela grows or as I grow, we help the team.
Right.
All the personalities and vice versa. As they grow and develop, they help us.
All right.
So there's this giant bleed through that happens, which is so cool. And it's like, and without that,
you're just here alone, having to do it all from like infancy with nothing.
We're not alone.
No background.
We're absolutely not alone. So, which is a good thing to realize. I have to remind myself. Actually.
Right. It really helps.
For deeper perspectives on reality, manifestation, consciousness, and personal and collective evolution, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Seth Center. We share quotes, clips, insights, and fresh angles on all the big questions, all rooted in the Seth material and designed to support your growth from the inside out.
So, all right, Dave, we talked about incarnational selves, past and future. Let's get into probable selves, because a lot of people have like, wait, what? So what does he mean by probable selves, and what does it do for us to even be aware of him?
Okay. So probable selves it's an easy one to explain, generally speaking, but then it gets a little complicated, but it's really cool. So probable self, picture it like you are making a choice. You decide, oh, look, I want to move somewhere else, or should I stay? So you make that choice, and let's just say you decide to move. So you move, and you have that experience of your life in this new place. And then also there's a part of you, there's another probable self that actually stayed. It didn't move. So there's actually, believe it or not, two of you in this example living your life. And I've got an example of that. So about 35 years ago, in 1990, I debated, should I move to Australia? And I decided to go. So I moved to Australia from the United States, and part of me also stayed, another probable self, stayed in the little town that I lived in. And from time to time, I have looked in on that probable self that stayed in the United States. I saw that me, who he married, what he did, what he was like, all that kind of stuff. And it was like, you can't even argue it when you have the experience. And I saw that one in the dream state. I'm sure you could use trance states as well. So here's another part of it is, as you go through your life, let's just say you get sick for some other reason. Well, there's another probable self that didn't. You follow me? So that it branches off. And then the probabilities can interweave and intertwine. So it's not a closed system. These probable selves all exist at the same time. And again, that bleed through that we were talking about, where the different selves gain experience, gain knowledge, gain insight, all of that comes back to roost inside all of these existences. And it all this is the cool part, it all feeds back into our entity. So our entity continues to grow through our experiences and our probable selves.
Interesting. So I also had a very traumatic experience with this. So I had mentioned, I think earlier, about how I had, like in my young adult life, I was choreographer, dancer. I was in the dance program at NYU and had gotten an injury they couldn't figure out. Anyway, there were a number of things going on, and I got veered off of that path. And it was very heartbreaking for me to do that. And
to give up your dance.
Yes. And for about 5 or more years, until I really got super deep into medicine, I was having these recurring dreams of the me who stayed down that path,
Right.
who created her own dance company, was touring the world. Like, I've had times where I've connected with this self, and then over the years, that self got way more interested in how you could combine dance and healing together. How could you use dance to, not just like physical healing, but like psychological healing.
Oh, therapeutic.
Therapeutic, like like dance therapy in a way, or using dance and expressive performance arts for spiritual growth
how cool.
and emotional healing. And so when they started to, exactly what you were saying, they started to weave together. So in later years, like about 20, 25 years after that bifurcation, they started to integrate.
Right.
They started to come back together. And I, at that time, I made the decision to leave medicine, go back into the arts, like it's so many different things. And that person was really going into using performance arts in a healing therapeutic way.
Yeah, it's so cool. When you start to see it in your own life, it's like, oh yeah, this is really a thing. This is as real as anything. And Seth describes a number of probable realities of Jane's, probable realities of Rob's and their parents and so forth. So he does make the point and really goes into great detail about it. But the cool thing is, you can use these probabilities, you can surf them. You can start to develop the best probable reality for you and other people at this time.
And another thing that I'm
No,
thinking
what?
of? Well, because, there are many people who have like deep anxiety of like, what if I make the wrong choice? Like, because it's very either or. And so if I choose this, then I can't have that. But because we're multidimensional beings, and because we're always fulfilling all potentiality and all significant probabilities, right? There is another you who gets to do that. You can't really make a wrong choice or truly miss out, because there is another aspect of this particular identity, not even another lifetime, but this particular identity who is fulfilling those other lines of possibility. So you don't have to be in such a state of fear or anxiety of like, oh my God, there's only one right choice. No.
No, there's many choices.
There's many choices.
Some will be easier and more pleasant and all, more constructive for sure.
Definitely.
But there are some that, if you make a bad choice, for example, or do a unconstructive choice, you'll learn, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how you learn great lessons.
And you can tune into the probable self who made a different one. Like you can just keep drawing from all the selves. So, all right. Let's add another layer. So I know people could be getting confused about this. It's like, how many selves are there? But we can't stop counting. They just keep going.
It's limitless. It's a brain cooker.
Yeah. And there is like a unifying field theory, right? They're not separate. They're all connected. It's just different aspects, facets of yourself, right? Like how many fingers do you have? 10. Does that okay, well, I've got a thumb. Why do I need 4 others? Well, because you can do more things with 4 other fingers. Well, why do I need another hand? Because you can do even more things with another hand, right? So I don't know.
More selves, the better.
Yeah. Well, whether or not it's
kind
better,
of the way it
it's
is.
how it
And
is.
it's kind of live with it and actually benefit from it, because Seth uses some great examples of like, especially if you're suffering in some way, like from a health condition, psychological issues, like you can actually help heal yourself by accessing some of these other probable selves that are you, and weave back into their health program.
Right, right. Well, it goes back to what you were saying about incarnational selves, because you're going to develop all of your abilities in one way or another through incarnational selves, through probable selves, and then we'll dive in a moment into counterpart selves. So as far as you're concerned, you're the center of your life, you're the focal personality.
Yeah.
So what do you need and what can you offer to the rest of you? Right?
Yeah.
You can get what you need from your inner self and from your other variations of self, and you can also offer, right? You can help them. So if you're doing pretty well, or if you've learned things, or if you've matured, or you've come to greater understanding, tolerance, whatever it might be, you spread that across the field.
You know, some of the people listening may want to know, well, okay, well, how do you get some of these goodies? Yeah. There's an easy one actually, and you probably already know this one, but you can start to create a structure for yourself, and it's a suggestion, but it starts to gain traction over time, and it is, anything I need to know will rise up into my consciousness.
I love that. What a super
so anything I need to know
suggestion.
will rise up into my consciousness.
Anything I need to know will rise up into my consciousness.
If you're in a debacle, like, what's going, you can sit yourself down and just say, what I need to know right now will rise up into my consciousness.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it works. Pay the bill, pay the part, like call Sally, all kinds of stuff. I use it in so many different ways.
I've observed this in you, and from somebody from the outside, it's like, it seems like you have an uncanny knack of knowing what to do when you need to do it, like the right place, right time, right thing to do. It's like, oh.
Yeah. And so with that little suggestion, you can also add to it. It's like, anything I know, anything I know.
Anything I know.
Anything I don't know.
The thimbleful of things I know.
Yeah, exactly. No, you can say, I will allow what I need to know to immediately rise into my consciousness and direct me.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe we should mention it. We've been teasing about counterparts. So let me just explain this a little bit, and then you can add to it. So what Seth has said is, like, he kind of started, if you read the books in order, he kind of started out gently, incarnational selves. There are a lot of people familiar with this concept or idea. And then he got further and further and further into it. And then there was probable selves. I can get that, right? We're branching off when we make a, significant decision. Well, what are counterparts? He says these are other selves that are alive in the same time period as you're in. And I've had some amazing, there's 2 counterpart selves in particular I can talk about, but have you had any awareness of a counterpart self
yes,
alive now on the planet?
Yeah, I'm assuming he's still on the planet because I haven't killed him yet. Now, we really butted heads when it was a former work colleague, actually 2 of them, supervisors of mine. And it's just like, there's, this is my experience, a repulsion and yet an attraction. And their abilities and skills were quite different than mine, but we were interested in the same general areas. So
how did you know he was a counterpart self? What was the sense?
Again, that attraction, like, there was an intense intense interactions over time. At the same, like there's an attraction to the abilities that they have, but also a repulsion. So it's a little complicated.
Interesting. I haven't
How
had
about
that
you?
experience. Well, there's certain people that I've met and been involved with where I realize, wait, there's some little inner knowing. It's like, I think this is a counterpart self because there's certain similarities of these
that.
motifs, right? That
Yeah,
were,
yeah.
But
Yeah, I have those too.
You've had those
but I'm
too.
trying to give you
Another-
some that aren't like, oh,
Yeah.
my buddy here.
Right.
You know?
No, I have two. One is a woman who lives in a very repressive Islamic nation, like where it's a religious government.
Oh, wow.
And I've been aware of her in the dream state and in other like altered states where for her it is physically dangerous for her to have like the kind of freedoms that I express as a white woman in North America, right? Like for her, that would not be physically safe, actually. So I've been aware of her terror, her fear of what it's like living in that society where it's really heavy restrictions on women.
So have you ever met this person?
No. I've just been aware of her in dream states and in just other things where so this is a personality that I've been sending like healing to, but sometimes I would feel like her fear would almost overwhelm me in a way. So that would be one. And then I had this other experience that was super cool. So years ago, when my son was like maybe in 6th grade, something like that, we did this very interesting art drawing class, and they were teaching how to do portrait, where you're just really working from basic shapes.
Yeah.
And so I just followed the instructions, and I'm not very, even though I'm an artist, I'm also a visual artist, but I don't draw well. Like I'm not that kind of artist. I can't like do representational art and draw a picture and make it look like you.
Right.
That's not my thing. So this was an actual like portrait, but just by following, okay, you make this shape, you make that shape. And it was in charcoal, and we did this whole thing. I actually have it framed. I can show it to you. And after it was finished, I recognized this person who, again, I had met in the dream state in my 20s. And it was right after I had been reading in one of the Seth books about counterpart selves.
Right.
I had met her in the dream state. And I remember this thing where there was like a symbol, something about stairs. And I was aware of her life and going on. And I just knew, oh, she's another one of me, but total different incarnation, but alive in the same time period.
Yeah.
And when I saw this portrait that I did,
But generally having unique
totally unique,
experiences. Like
completely
it wouldn't be
different.
the same.
No,
Yeah.
totally different background, different experiences, different like life path.
Yeah, Seth says, like, you may like them, you may get along with, if you meet them, you may get along with them, but you might not.
You might not.
You might not. And which I was trying to outline
Yeah.
that, but I've met others that are, I believe, are counterparts.
Yeah,
and we get along
interesting.
like a house on fire.
Interesting. So again, like I can say, like for example, the Muslim woman, right?
Yeah.
There are certain themes. Like for me, there's been a lot. Like when I look in my career history, like a lot of my medical years were really working deeply with women's health, women's medicine, and a lot around female empowerment and female liberation and freedom of female sexual expression and economic power, like all of that. And so she's experiencing like, if you're looking at it from the entity over self, over soul kind of viewpoint, right? If you want to explore a theme around that, you have to experience it from all the different angles, right? So this self is experiencing it from what's it like living in a culture where it's heavily repressed, and I'm in a different culture getting a different angle on that. So I think that would be a way that we could look at it. And again, I think the point of like, well, how does this benefit us? Why should we even connect with it is because you can tap into wisdom, learning, skills, ability more personality development, more evolution of your spiritual, emotional growth, more understanding of yourself as a whole being. It's all connected together. You're much bigger than just this personality, and you have a lot more resources and creativity and wisdom to tap from.
Absolutely. And the easiest way to do this is you can go into a trance and request, as part of the mission of the trance is I would like to see some of my probable selves or my counterparts, or I will meet up with them and I will know who they are. You can do that within the dream state, request to see them, and you'll get a response.
Yeah, you could even do things like creative process, writing process, as though you're like, I'm going to let a self come through, or I'll create something that will show me something about that other person's life. And I think we might want to say, can you explain more what you mean by trance? Maybe you could use some other words, because that might kind of freak people out. What do you mean by that? Because Seth
Don't freak out just yet. No, it's not a freak out at all. We all go into trance all the time. So what it really means is it's to start with, it's a relaxed state. It might be that fuzzy, furry feeling where you're just feeling, you're listening to your favorite music and you're in a relaxed state. You're actually in a light trance at that point. And if you can deepen that trance to where it kind of exclude exterior reality, exterior sounds, feelings, so forth. And so you can deepen trances, as Jane did. And you can do that too, and request that you see visuals, hear audios. If you go into yet a deeper trance with your eyes closed and do something we call psychological time, you can then start to have, videos where you can see things. And in the dream state, obviously, you see things and you create your own videos. Or another part of yourself called the inner self starts to create those videos. And you make the request. It's easy enough. I'd like to meet a probable self, or I'd like to meet what was the other word?
Counterpart.
Counterpart.
Or incarnational self.
A reincarnational self, and you'll be answered.
Yeah. So I think in future or in other episodes, we'll talk about ways that you can access, like how you can turn on your inner senses so that you can do things outside of just ordinary walk, talk, chew gum, drive down the street perception, right? Where you can access other
let's
abilities.
Do that in another one.
We'll do that in another one.
Get more practical, but
yeah.
Look, I think that kind of wraps this one. Basically, we've covered it a little bit. If you want to read more, a good place to start with some of these reincarnational selves is Seth Speaks.
Definitely.
And as you go through, you'll see some of the references to that. And especially at the end, holy crap, like Seth goes into a number of his reincarnational or simultaneous existences when he was physical. And some of them, what's the lady's name? Is it Marabella? I think it is. A woman, I believe.
Marbella.
Marbella in the Middle East. It's so touching. It's just every time I read it, it blows me away.
Aww.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you'll get there. I recommend that you start, and for those of you new to the material, give it a try. Maybe read the first few chapters of Seth Speaks or the Seth material. See how that resonates with you. If this resonated with you today, give it a try. See what comes.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Michaela. Yeah.